All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Mira, and I am doing a presentation on the disproportionate mortality rates of POC women during child labor. So, what are the basics of the issue? The issue is that the CDC says that Black, American Indian, and Alaskan Native women, so POC women, are 2 to 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women, and this disparity increases with age. Some people have attributed this to fluke accidents or fluke genetics, but the CDC actually says that most pregnancy-related deaths are preventable. So this begs the question, why does this happen at such disproportionate rates if it is so easily preventable? And the answer to the question goes deeper than this, but on the surface, it is negligence and bias of medical staff. In a broader sense, the larger issue at hand is healthcare disparity and unequal access to healthcare and unequal access to quality treatment and healthcare for minorities in America. To define it, health and healthcare disparities refer to differences in health and healthcare between groups that are closely linked with social, economic, and/or environmental disadvantage. Disparities occur across many dimensions, such as race and ethnicity, socioeconomic status, age, location, gender, disability status, or sexual orientation. So what are a few of the causes? Starting at the very surface, there's economic inequality. This starts from the beginning with education and housing. So minorities make up more of low-income housing in America as opposed to high-income housing, and this is a result of racial bias in areas in terms of job hiring and as well as education. It starts at the very root. So 46% of, just for an example, in a study done by the Urban Institute, low-income families are more likely to be headed by an immigrant or foreign-born adult than middle or higher income families. And about 46% of Black families were low income and 63% of Hispanic immigrant families were lower income, just as an example. This starts with, as I said, access to education and racial bias. So a lot of the schools in these low-income areas are not very funded and they don't have very good resources for education, thus hindering kids from getting a good higher education or motivation to pursue higher education, and thus not being able to get a job out of high school or college because of the lack of education there is. And these jobs that they get lead to the kind of insurance that they have as well. And at the very root of this inability to get a job to live in a higher income area or education to allow them a job that allows them to live in these areas is a result of the systems of oppression in the United States and an ongoing racial bias, which allows them to not have access to these resources. On the other side of the issue, racial bias comes in the form of neglecting the needs of women during child labor, which causes a lot of them to die unnecessarily. So just looking at the very root of it being being racial bias, racism, and gender bias as well. So those are the causes and what communities this affect most. I kind of went over it already, but minorities, women of color, women in general, trans women as well. Yeah, so here's a visual example, just so you can see how disparate the rates are. I also wanted to connect it to modern day in an even broader sense. It even extends into COVID and the pandemic's racial disparity. As you can see, it's very disproportionately affecting the Black community than it is the white community, as well as other people of color, such as Hispanic or Latino people or American Indian or Alaskan Native people. So moving on to the moral implications, as I've mentioned, it perpetuates system of oppression. It allows economic equality to continue to grow, and it allows diseases to be transferred throughout communities, causing unhealthy communities to grow because people are not getting the proper care that they deserve. And then lastly, just a blatant disregard for human life and quality of human life. This leads me to talk about Immanuel Kant, who is the philosopher I'll be using to look through his perspective. He is a deontologist. He deals with duty ethics. What should we do? What's the right thing to do? And why is it the right thing to do? So Kant says that everything in nature works according to laws. Now, humans, he says, are rational beings, so we have free will and bodily autonomy to not follow these laws, to make our own laws. But we can use reason to do the rational thing, or we can act upon our own selfish inclinations. So we can use reason to go against these moral laws that we create for ourselves. To have a good will means to use this reason to act in a very just way, is what he says. And a way he gives us of deciding what is moral, how he thinks humans might theorize this is using the categorical imperatives, which are essentially moral laws that humans derive right and wrong from, using reason to derive our actions from the law. And it is basically a universal law. So there are three of them, and that is what I will be using to show what Kant would think of this disparity in healthcare for POC women. So the first categorical imperative, and the strongest, I think, for this argument, is to act as if the maxim of your action were to become, through your will, a universal law of nature. So there's two ways of testing if this situation could become a universal law, and thus to show if it is moral or not. So the first one is, can it be universalized? So if we gave every woman an equal access to healthcare and equal access to quality of care, and were negligent upon every woman while she is in labor, we would have higher rates of mother and infant immortality, as well as rising healthcare costs due to this negligence. So it cannot be universalized because more people would be dying, hospital infrastructure would be destroyed, and it would just be a chaotic world to live in. And the second is to question whether or not this is the world you want to live in. I don't think anyone wants to live in a world where most women die when giving birth. So based on this imperative, Kant, I think, would find this issue immoral. There's another imperative, which is the second, which says, act in such a way that you always treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never simply as a means, but always in the same time as an end. So this is the golden rule, basically: treat others as you want to be treated. And I think it is fairly obvious that we would not want this disparity to affect our entire society, as no one would want the same harm to be done upon them. No one else wants to die. So Kant would also rule the disproportionate rates to be an act of immorality rather than fluke accidents. It's this negligence he would find to be immoral, as the issue does not pass to the second imperative. And I think these are reason enough to say that Kant would find this immoral and that we need a solution. But there is a third imperative, which is to act as if through your maxims you are a lawmaking member of a kingdom of ends. Basically to say that if would you as a ruler make this action a law? And I don't think anyone would want to, I don't think Kant thinks, and I don't think that anyone would, as a smart ruler, would want to continue to allow this negligence to occur and to make it a law within the healthcare system, as this undermines the integrity of humanity and healthcare workers, and would cause, again, mortality rates to just increase. So Kant would also rule this immoral, as it doesn't pass the third imperative. So a possible Kantian solution, I think, would be universal healthcare, or a similar principle to this. It passes the categorical imperatives because you can universalize universal healthcare, or a similar principle, and it provides everyone with the same equitable care, regardless of their race, sexuality, gender, anything of that nature. And it would allow for these women to get the healthcare they need. The counter argument for this, also, it passes the second test, which would be to that this is a world we want to live in, where everybody has equal access to these issues. To these services. The counter argument for this, I think, would be costs and having to implement it. It could not pass the first imperative because maybe not everyone wants to live in a world where universal healthcare or a similar principle is employed, as it drives up cost of taxes, most likely. And some people may not be willing to pay that, so thus not everyone may want to live in that world. But I feel that the positives in this situation outweigh the negative, as it prohibits people from dying, and it helps to combat systemic oppression. So with that, here are my sources, and thank you very much.